Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. Miss Ford here. Today we are going to be making a nice fall dessert or breakfast if you're into that kind of thing. But it's an oven baked apple crisp. And we are going to be using a mixing method that we haven't used before, and it's called the biscuit method. And we're not technically like making a biscuit or anything, but it utilizes the same technique. So far we've gone over the creaming method, which is usually the first thing it says is to cream your fat with your sugar. We've also gone over the muffin method, which is mixing the dry ingredients, mixing the wet ingredients, and then combining them. And now we're going to be doing the biscuit method, which is combining your dry ingredients, cutting in cold fat, we're going to be using butter, and then mixing that into coarse crumbs. And then typically you'll add your liquid. But we're just going to be using the biscuit method, making the crumb topping. Okay, here we go. First things first, we are going to be making the crumb topping. So I am going to be doing this gluten-free, but it works even better with regular flour. So the recipe calls for 1/2 cup flour. And I'm measuring that out just like I always measure out my flour. I'm not scooping it in and packing it. I'm lightly spooning it. And then I'm going to level it off. So 1/2 cup flour. And I need 1/2 cup old-fashioned oats. I'm again using gluten-free oats. Oats are actually typically gluten-free. They come gluten-free. What happens though is in the processing plants, usually they're processed in plants that also process things with gluten in them, and so there can be some cross-contamination. So if you do have celiac disease or you're really serious about eating gluten-free, you want to make sure you buy gluten-free oats. However, like I said, oats are naturally gluten-free. Okay, so I need 1/2 cup of oats. And I need 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I'm going to use a different scoop because I had my flour in here and I don't want to dip that in my brown sugar. Brown sugar is always packed, so you want to pack it in there really tight. This is a 1/4 cup measuring cup, so I'm going to do 2 of those to equal 1/2. And then I need 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And remember, baking powder is a combination of baking soda plus the acid already. Okay, so I need 1/2 teaspoon of this. I need 1/2 teaspoon of, or I'm sorry, 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And I need a dash of salt. So I'm just going to pour a little bit of salt in my hand and take some nice big pinch, dash of salt. Okay. And then I have my butter. I have 1/3 cup of cold unsalted butter. If you only have salted butter, that's fine. Just maybe don't put so much salt into your topping ingredients. So before I add the butter though, I'm going to go ahead and mix this all together I can, just so everything's kind of evenly mixed throughout. Okay, now I'm going to chop my butter up into small pieces just to get the process going. Now, there are a couple different ways you can cut butter into dry ingredients. The first one is you can use a pastry blender. I don't have a pastry blender. It's just kind of wires that go around and you kind of smush it like this and it breaks the butter. It cuts the butter into the dry ingredients. I don't have one. They're not necessary. They're really big and kind of bulky and they take up a lot of room in your drawers. So the other thing you can do is you can use 2 butter knives and you can just slice them like this and crisscross them, cutting the butter into your dry ingredients. That will work. However, I prefer just to use my hands. It's faster, it's a little messier, but it works a lot better. Try to toss the butter and the dry ingredients before kind of squeezing the butter with your fingers. Try not to handle it too much because you don't want to melt the butter with your hands. It's actually better if you start with cold hands. So if you could hold on to a cold soda or take out a frozen bag of vegetables beforehand, that would work nicely. What you're looking for is kind of a sandy mixture. You don't want it mixed in too much, but kind of a rough, crumbly, about the size of peas. Now, the recipe doesn't call for it, but I love sliced almonds or pecans or any type of nut if you don't have an allergy. And so I'm just going to sprinkle a couple of sliced almonds in mine, maybe like a quarter cup or so. And just toss those in the mixture. And then I'm just going to set this aside. Now we need to get the filling ready. So in order to do that, we need to peel and slice 4 to 5 medium-sized apples. So I just got these Golden Delicious apples, and there's a couple different ways you can peel them. Now, you can technically leave the skin on because that is where all of most of the fiber and nutrients are in the apple skin. However, it kind of leaves a weird texture when you bake them, so I'm just going to take it off. A lot of times I'll just put it aside as a snack, and I'll snack on the apple skin. So you can use just a vegetable peeler if you want. I find it a little difficult using a vegetable peeler, so sometimes I'll just grab a paring knife, and I'll just use a paring knife. So whichever way you are comfortable with will be the way that you should do this. When you're using a paring knife, it looks scary because I'm dragging the knife towards my hand, but I'm not putting much pressure on it, and I'm being very careful, trying to waste as little of the apple as possible and only get the skin off. If you see any brown bits on your apples, you can go ahead and slice those off. Okay? And continue on doing all your apples. Okay, so I have all my apples peeled. Now we're going to core them and slice them. So for that, I'm going to be using my chef's knife. I'm going to use the tunnel method by holding the apple like this and putting the knife through my hand to make the first slice. Then I'm going to cut it into quarters. Same using the tunnel method. Now, I'm going to place it on its side and just carefully cut the core out, making sure I get all the seeds. And I'm going to continue doing that with all my apples. So once all of your apples are cored, then you are going to go ahead and slice them. Now, I'm going to be using the pinch grip method with my knife and the claw method with my other hand, making sure all my fingers stay out of the way, including my thumb. And I'm going to go as slow as need be to make sure that I don't cut any of my fingers off. When it gets down to the bit where I get a little nervous, I can just turn it on a flat side and just cut it so it's about the same thickness as the other ones. And continue on. Okay, so I have my bowl of nice and evenly sliced apples. I tried to cut them as well as I could the same thickness so that they all cook around the same time. to pour this over my gorgeous apples. And using the same, I'm just going to use the same rubber spatula that I used for the chopping because it's all going in the same place. I am going to gently toss and fold my apple slices into this beautiful mixture. I want to make sure everything is evenly coated before I pour it into my pan. I'm hoping I have enough room in my pan. It looks like it's going to be a ton of apples, but what's going to happen is there's so much water in apples that it will cook down, and you'll be surprised at the end of how little filling there is once it's all cooked. So I am going to take my 8 by 8 inch pan, no need to butter it or oil it or anything, and I am just going to pour these apples on in, spread them around. You can try to kind of pack them down because we need to have room for our topping, right? Try to kind of smush them so they fall together like little puzzle pieces. And then I'm going to take my gorgeous topping and evenly distribute the topping over the apples. Make sure you get them in the corners too. Definitely want topping all over. This is the best part. Then I'm going to stick this in my oven that is preheated to 375 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes until the top is nice and golden brown and you'll see this bubbling underneath. It's not a bad idea to put this on a baking sheet before you put it in your oven because sometimes if the apples are exceptionally juicy, some of the mixture could pour out over this and then burn on the bottom of your oven, which results in fire alarms going off and just a horrible mess to clean up. So I'm going to stick this on a cookie sheet first. About 30 to 35 minutes in a 375 degree oven. Okay, it has been about 32 minutes and it is ready to come out. And let it cool about 10 minutes in that hot pan and then serve it and it'll still be nice and warm with some cold vanilla ice cream.